Well, welcome back. In today's session, I am going to talk about the whole idea or the necessity for co living between couples, or the need uh, to move in with a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a partner, um, or someone you are having an intimate relationship with. This is something that is quite prevalent in the UK. It's also very prevalent in most of the developed world, the developed West. And you can start to see some aspects of this culture moving into other parts of the world. Let me address what I think is, in many ways, a tradition that has been passed on across generations, and sadly, something that I think is doing more harm in relationships than good. But to deal with this, I may have to address this particular topic across a number of separate videos. But let me begin by saying that historically, if you go back to the 19th century or even the 18th century, and if you looked at the average age at which a young man or a young woman got married, for the women, on average, over the entire period between the 18th, the 19th century, the 20th century, the average age for marriage was roughly about 25 for the woman, and not too dissimilar for the men. The life expectancy back then was about 45, roughly the mid 40s. And what that meant was, if you got married, and recognizing that back then, the only way a man could live with a woman was to be married to her. If you were not married, then you had to have been under the supervision, the authority of a father or mother in a family structure. But you couldn't just go out and pick up a woman, even if she was your girlfriend, and move in with her and have all the benefits that were supposed to be restricted to those willing to pay the price of marriage. But in any case, if you moved in with your wife, you had roughly 20 years, during which time both parties made their best efforts to make the relationship work, to make the marriage work, to make the family structure work. And if you were to think about the fact that 20 years is not a long time to dedicate yourself to someone. In those days, the woman left her parents' home, the man left his parents' home. Both of them had never lived on their own. Historically, you stay with your parents until you got married. So 20 years was enough time to get to know each other. And before you knew what was happened, someone died. Now, the life expectancy for the woman today in the UK is just slightly over 80 years. And for men, it's roughly about 78, but also approaching 80 years. And what that means is, although the marriageable age in the UK has moved up to 36, even if you use 36 as the benchmark, if you moved in with someone at 36, being a woman, it would still imply that you have roughly 44 years, so twice the amount of time that our ancestors had. The issue is that people are still moving in with their boyfriends and their partners around 25, sometimes even 18, 19. As soon as they leave home and move to college, they move in within the first year or two with a boyfriend. And what you find is a transition from home into another home. The first 4-5 years between 18 and 22 should be the prime years for any individual, any adult, to try to get to know themselves. But if you jump from one home to another, then you haven't afforded yourself the opportunity to get to know yourself. What that means is that most people are moving in with their partners, their boyfriends, their girlfriends, their wives, their husbands, at roughly the same age as we used to have in the past, 25. From 25 to roughly 80 years, you have 55 years. That is a long time, a long, long time to be with one person. Usually when the relationship begins, the idea is that this will work. And in many ways, what I'd like to address comes in a number of subsections. The first is that for men between 18 and 35, the best advice, and one of the best advice I can give you, maybe second to delaying marriage, is also to delay when you move in with a woman. Delay that as long as you can. In my opinion, and my recommendation is that you should not live with someone or live with a girlfriend or a partner until about 30. You shouldn't consider living together until about 30 years. Ideally 35, which is when you should be thinking about getting married, if you want to get married. And there's so many reasons. And I'll share some of them today, and in the next session I can try and expand. But let me start with some basics. The period between 18 and 35 for every man is way too important for you to derail yourself from achieving your goals. The seeds you're sowing for the future are still too tender. The soil you're sowing in is still very, very, very new. You're not aware of the seasons. So one of the things you have to do between the age of 18 and 35 is to be laser focused on one thing and one thing alone: yourself. Trying to bring out that greatness in you, trying to bring out the mastery that could be yours if you dedicate your time. I have explained the reason for needing so much time. Relationships are dream killers. Now, forgive me for saying that, but between the age of 18 and 35, relationships are dream killers. Between the age of 18 and 35, about 95 of all of the relationships you have will amount to nothing. Especially, I'm talking about relationships between you, the man, and a woman. Most of them will be casual. Most of them may be intimate and sustained, but eventually, like a flame to a fire, will die out eventually. What that simply means is that any obstacle that is put before you and your goals, or before you and your vision, should be eliminated. And I think one of the biggest obstacles is moving in together. Usually moving in together precedes getting married. Moving in together often is the channel through which you, the man, you're sucked into starting a family too early, being a father, becoming a surrogate father to a pet, taking on more responsibility whilst you're still a child. One of the key things about living alone is it gives you the opportunity to discover yourself, to understand what you like, when you like to wake up, when you like to go to bed, what kind of music you like, what kind of food you like, the quantity of food you like to eat, the kind of friends you should keep, the kind of music you like to listen to. In many ways, you're like a blank canvas. And when you live alone, you can paint on the canvas and you can start again. And you can paint and you can start again. And you can paint and you can start again. If you introduce another person into your life and you move in with them, in many ways, what you're saying is, I am going to bring forward the obligations of marriage, the obligations and the responsibilities of a husband, of a father. I'm going to bring that forward into the present whilst I'm trying to sow the seeds of my future. And one of two things will always happen. Your focus will be broken because you would have to learn, or you'll be forced to put the needs of another person before yours. The second is that you would abort the seed that is in what I call the womb of your divine greatness. Let me expand on this ever so slightly. Let's assume you leave home at 18 and you move into college. You move into the halls of residence. Within the first year, you meet someone you find very, very attractive. At that point, you're 19. You're still very young. In any case, you're in love. Both of you decide to move in together. From age 19, one of many things start to happen. Number one, you begin a mono relationship, something that I think is wrong between the age of 18 and 35. You need to sow your oats. You need to test the market. You need to discover yourself, find out what you like, what you enjoy, get some practice. Let me segue, let me deviate. One of the causes or one of the reasons for marriage breakdowns has to do with infidelity. In many cases, the infidelity comes, not always, but in most cases comes as a result of one person not being satisfied. Sometimes that is a result of perhaps not even having any experience in the avenue of satisfying your loved one. Part of that has to do with perhaps you haven't practiced, you haven't tried, you've met one or two people, and you've decided to choose one of those people. And that means you don't have practice. And if the person you're with has more experience, there's a dissatisfaction that cannot last for the entire life of the relationship. You either have to improve to get to their level, to meet their needs, or you have to almost concede that someone else sometime would have to make up for your deficiencies. Like anything in life, practice makes improvement. If you've had no practice, you cannot be great at anything. So let me speak to ladies. Whenever you see a woman say, I have met a man and he is awesome in bed, all she is describing is a man who has had a lot of practice, or who is naturally endowed, or who perhaps has spent some time trying to understand what she wants, or someone she doesn't have any inhibitions and can be free. So one of the disadvantages of moving in and living with someone is you're forced into a mono relationship. When you're single, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, if you wanted to, you can have different people around. Let's put it that way. And that would simply mean you have a variety and you can enjoy your single life. Again, I said 5% of your time should be spent on women. 95% of your time between 18 and 35 should be focused on your vision, work, work, work. Building a financial base, sowing the seeds of your future wealth. That 5%, if you think about this in numerical terms, 10 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, 18 hours. There are 24 hours in a day. That leaves you with roughly 6 hours. So you have 6 hours every day across 7 days. It's 42 hours. 5% of 42 hours is roughly 2 hours and a bit. That is the only time you have for relationships. And what that means is that most of your time should be focused on work, on being the best and developing yourself into the best version of yourself. The moment you introduce a relationship into the equation, something changes. Suddenly, what you tend to find, your working hours starts to reduce. The amount of time you're spending in the relationship starts to increase. The amount of time you spend sleeping decreases. What suffers is your dream, your goals. So first things first, if you choose a mono relationship, and if you are in a mono relationship, and you move in together, the woman has exclusivity, she has a monopoly on sex. And I can guarantee something, after the first 6 months, the quantity and the quality of sex starts to decline, because there's something in the human being, a tendency to say, once I have achieved the goal, which is to move in or live with someone, then I don't have to work as hard as I used to before I had the goal. So assuming I was a single person and I had 4 or 5 different girlfriends, I can have them in rotation. One person Monday, one person Tuesday, one person Wednesday, one person Thursday. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I rotate again. It means if I meet the first person on Monday, I don't get to see her until Friday. What that means is that she does everything she can to stay relevant, because it's a case of demand and supply. I have more supply and I am in demand. And what tends to happen is women are usually their most attractive when they are single and when they live on their own. The moment they move in with you, they have exclusivity to you. You go into a mono relationship, sex declines because she gives you sex when she wants. When you live alone, she gives you sex when you want. So keep this in mind, because the idea most men have is you meet a very attractive young woman and the thought process is, I'm getting sex on demand because I live alone. If we move in together, perhaps I can have it 3-4 times every day, because I get to see her once or twice a week. And when we meet each other, we are like bunnies. We have sex twice in the day. The mindset a man has is that this will simply be a daily occurrence, without realizing the woman has a monopoly on sex. The moment she has the keys to the house and moves in, she calls the shots. Now, something else happens as part of that process. The attention to detail that she pays to her sexual attractiveness, her beauty, her weight, her size, the way she dresses, declines. When you're single, she gets to dress up to come and see you. So you see her in her best attires. Her best, she's putting forward her best self. When she moves in with you, you get to see her most of the time in her worst state, primarily because both of you work and it's so much easier to put on lounge clothing to be comfortable. So when you come back home, or she comes back home, both of you are not in your best attires. You're not putting your best foot forward because it becomes exhausting. Remember, I said the dating is an art of deception. When you move in together, there is no need for the deception. You can be real. You realize she doesn't like to wear certain types of clothes, which she loved when both of you lived separately. You realize she doesn't like things at certain times of the day. You realize that what she used to do previously, sexually, she did that because she was trying to win you over. Now that's just one aspect, and that just has to do with the loss of the freedom you had, I guess, to sow your oats, to test the market. Secondly is the decline in a sexual attraction. Most of the time, once a woman moves in with you, she stops going to the gym. When you both are single, both of you go to the gym. And let me expand on a few other items because I think I've moved away from what I was originally going to discuss, but I'm mindful of time. But let me share one or two other things. For 18 years, from an infant all the way up to when you're 18, you've lived under the directive and under the instructions of a parent. You're told when to sleep, what to eat, when to wake, when to go to school, when to pray, when to smile. You're made to work even when you don't want to. You've lived under the shadow of another person for 18 years. Assuming you move out when you are 18, you just turned 18, you should be slightly more hesitant to move under the directive of someone else, because that is exactly what happens when you move in with a woman. Women by nature are very good at nurturing. They like to nest. And what tends to happen is when you move in with a woman, she starts to nest. It becomes a home. When you live on your own, it's just a house. The woman makes the house, a home. Something that is to be admired. But that comes with restrictions. Now, you've heard me say before that with choices come constraints. Those constraints and the choices made lead to consequences. Those consequences will always have trade-offs. So you're always trading one thing against another. The man thinks in his head, if I move in with her, I get free sex, I get free meals, I get someone to cook for me, I get someone to be there for me, I get someone to nurture, someone to play with, and someone who would accept me for who I am. Theoretically, in your mind, I can understand that perspective. The question is always, what is the trade-off? The trade-off is you get into a mono relationship. You stop sowing your oats. You have less sex. You have a less attractive girlfriend with time. You have more arguments. The project makeover will start because she starts to change you. You lose your freedom. You lose a sense of self, because when two people merge, in many ways, there's a loss of your identity. I said before that marriage is the death of two people and the birth of a union. Moving in together is almost the same as being married, with the exception of the contract that is signed to the state. So, people who are moving in together very early are making a mistake. You need some time. My recommendation is delay that until 30. From 30, you can start considering the idea. But if you go ahead with my advice about not getting married until 35, then that simply means you shouldn't move in with anyone until 35. Now, I admit that there are positive benefits to moving in together with someone. I'll try to deal with those in a subsequent session. But let me I guess, summarize the issue about freedom and discovering yourself by saying, you have to learn to love yourself. You have to learn to get to know yourself. In the great words of Socrates, there's a saying that if you go to the temple of Apollo in Delphi, there are two words: know thyself. Know thyself. The Greek saying, there is something that precedes those two words, and there is something that succeeds those two words. In order to know yourself, you have to first study yourself. Study yourself, you get to know yourself, and then you be thyself. That requires an amount of time, because as a man, one of the things we cannot do, we cannot afford, is to fail. Fail at the art of provision or providing, or being able to protect a family. We can't fail at that. One of the reasons why we have almost a delegation of our responsibility in society today by men is that we haven't taken time to get to know ourselves. Between 18 and 30, you have 12 years just to focus on yourself. Or 13 years rather, you should focus on yourself. My preference is between 18 and 35. Dedicate all of that time to yourself. Get to know who you are. Get to understand your limitations, your troubles, your fears, your pains, your strengths, your success moments. Try things out. Try and fail. And the reason is because if you think about a cup, in order for you to pour into someone else, you need to have something in you to pour. And what we're finding in society today is most people are looking for someone else to complete them. So they move in because they don't have any way of pouring into themselves. They haven't given themselves the time to get to know who they are. I'd like to leave you with perhaps a few thoughts. If you think about all of the great natural resources, diamond, gold, oil, the natural minerals, one of the things that is synonymous amongst most of them is that most of them are buried in the soil. They're buried in the dark. They're concealed. In order to find them, it's almost as though the universe, or God, says, well, you want gold? Then you go dig for it. You want oil? Then you go find it. You want diamond? You go search. All of these beautiful natural resources are placed in places that are dark. Places that are what you might call solitary, alone. And it requires the digging, the searching, the laboring to uncover those gems. And when you've uncovered the gems, you can't use them. You have to go through a process of purification, separation, in order to bring forth the beauty of what those minerals are supposed to do and to be. So the value of the mineral is not what its original product is. The value is what you transform it to be. And in most cases, sometimes you put those minerals through the fire. You take it from a dark place to put it in a place of heat. And the beauty comes out once it's gone through each of those phases. For a man, the 18 years between 18 and 35 is the opportunity for you to go from the soil, then you're found, then you're inserted back into the fire, then you come out whole, And now you have something in you of value to pour into another. So just keep that in mind. I'll have to do a follow-up session where I expand on the benefits, or rather the benefits of being alone, and why you should remain single if you are a man, at least until 35. But let me leave you with a few thoughts so you can understand that there are some conditions under which two people can decide to move in together. The first is if both of them have decided that they want to get married. And if, and only if, a proposal has been made and the wedding date has been set, and that is imminent within the next 12 months, and then you both can decide to trial out living together to see whether you can stand each other for more than 24 hours. Alternatively, you've decided you want to be married. You haven't set a date, but you intend to set that date within the next 12 months. Now, recognize I'm not talking about the engagement date. I'm referring to the wedding, the date you sign the contract to be one. The whole idea of moving in and living together for 2, 3, 4, 5 years before you get married should be avoided. There should be a 6-month period. In other words, if you move in with someone, ideally you should be getting married within the next 6 months. Or if you move in with someone, you've already set the date, and that should take place within 12 months. That is, in my opinion, one of the conditions under which two people should move in together. You've made a decision that you're moving towards marriage. In many ways, I am still against living together because it goes against everything that we used to hold sacred. In many ways, a woman who moves in with a man, perhaps I shouldn't say this, because, but there is an element of devaluing that takes place to the woman's value, because in principle, the man should be paying the highest price. The greatest honor a woman gives a man is the gift of saying, I'm going to bring life into the world for you. But in order for that to take place, something should precede that process, which is she decides to take your hand in marriage, or take up your offer for you to take her hand in marriage. In order for that to take place, the man should be asking for her hand in marriage, and then they can move in together, and then they can have a family. We've got things out of sequence